Joining me is Kristen Welker, White House correspondent for NBC News and co-anchor of Weekend Today. She served as the moderator of the final presidential debate. Kristen, what's your takeaway after you heard from those voters?
What a great report, Bob, and I think it captures what is happening in Pennsylvania. You have some of President Trump's staunchest supporters who aren't going anywhere, and you hear some of what we hear from President Trump on the campaign trail coming out of their mouths, concerns about Joe Biden and potentially a socialist agenda, which of course he would argue is not the case at all. And then you have some of those voters, the farmer who you interviewed, who said he feels as though he's been hurt by the trade war with China. So that is the tension. And of course, those critical voters in the suburbs, particularly suburban women, that is where this race is going to turn, I think, in Pennsylvania. So we'll be watching closely to see what happens in the suburbs. And then Philadelphia. This is a region that Hillary Clinton just didn't get the same numbers that Barack Obama did. She was about 4,000 short. And so that allowed President Trump to run up the numbers in some of those more rural areas of the state. So a lot is at stake here, but that's why you have Joe Biden, his top surrogates, focused on Pennsylvania. President Trump as well. He's going to be there the day before Election Day. So the significance of the Keystone State cannot be overstated, Bob.
Kristen, I grew up in Bucks County outside of Philadelphia. You're from Philadelphia. And that city, it's a great city of brotherly love. It's been roiled by protests and anguish following the police shooting of 27-year-old black man Walter Wallace Jr. It's been a tragic event. And Kristen, you pressed the candidates to speak directly to black and brown Americans at the debate you moderated. As you track what's going on in Philadelphia, our home city, what do you think this crisis means for the campaign?
I think that critical city that you mentioned, and you're absolutely right, has been devastated by those protests, by those who have lost their lives. And so I think that is going to be one of the motivating factors, undoubtedly, on Election Day and in the early voting process as well. It will undoubtedly energize African-American voters who, of course, are going to go to the polls, not all voting for the same person. But again, they will be voting, some of them, on that issue of Black Lives Matters and those peaceful protests, the ones that have been peaceful, who will be energized to come out, who are calling for change. Now, Joe Biden has said that he understands the message. He's someone who has said that he believes in the Black Lives Matter movement, but very different messaging from President Trump on this topic. As you know, in fact, he has put the focus on those who have tried to capitalize on the peaceful protests and have turned those protests violent. And so President Trump has used that to underscore what he calls his law and order messaging, to appeal to some of those suburban voters. So the question is, will he be able to offset what will likely be a large turnout in Philadelphia and the surrounding region for all of the reasons that you're laying out? That's the key question.
And when you talk to your sources at the White House, what are you hearing about the final days as the president goes to Pennsylvania? Will it be about law and order only? Will other issues be discussed?
Well, look, if it were up to his aides and advisors, President Trump would put the focus on the economy, and he would have a very directed message and try to argue that he is the candidate to turn the economy around and to help with the comeback, essentially. And of course, as we've noted before, he has spent a fair amount of time talking about the strong GDP number that we got earlier this week. But as you know, when he goes into these cities, particularly Philadelphia, and when he goes into Pennsylvania, he has stressed that law and order message. So yes, I think we're going to hear more of that. I also think you're going to hear more of the type of language that we heard earlier this week when he talked about you have to watch the governors, you have to watch what they're doing, trying to essentially raise questions about the very validity of the election process, despite the fact that there's just no evidence suggesting that there's any fraud or that any of the votes have been miscounted. And so you have Democratic leaders of the state, the governor there, there, Tom Wolf, pushing back against that narrative very strongly. And I do think that that type of messaging runs counter to what a number of his advisors feel is his most effective message. Voters think that he is strong on the economy, so they want him to stay on track and on that point.
I was talking to some strategists today, Republican strategists, and they said the president wants to run against Governor Wolf. But it's hard to run against Governor Wolf, they privately confided, because Governor Wolf is so low-key. He's not like Governor Whitmer of Michigan, who's in the headlines. Many Pennsylvanians aren't really familiar with Governor Wolf.
It's a really great point. And in fact, after President Trump took direct aim at the governor, he was pressed about that by NBC's Craig Melvin and was asked essentially, do the president's comments amount to voter intimidation? And Governor Wolf said, no, I just think he doesn't understand how the process works because the governor is not counting every vote that comes in. Well, it's rather something that happens at the state and county level.